All right. Hello and welcome to episode 16 of the Crackdown. Today we are joined by Jack, obviously from the song that we just played. You don't know Jack, you're about to know him right now. Obviously owner of Cloud9, first team owner that we have on our show, so it's really good to have someone like him here to discuss more of like the business end of things and, you know, roster building, etc. So yeah, how you doing today, man? I see you got the quarantine cut, so you feeling good? You ready to talk about it?
Yeah, I got the 6 on top, 4 on the sides. We're pretty limited on barbers, and so our content person Maddie cut my hair for me, and she's been making her way through all the players.
Oh, really?
Also, you know, have you seen actually that shirt that Jack's wearing? Show them the shirt, Jack. Show them what it says. It says 2020 Cloud9 LCS champions. You know what's cool about that? Like, I've seen a similar one. Like, I saw some like African kids wearing one that said 2019. There was one from 2018. You get the joke anyway. Obviously, been a while coming, right?
It's been a long time. You know, unfortunately, we've made several iterations of these shirts that never saw the light of day.
There you go.
And it feels really good to actually have one we can wear.
People don't realize that joke I said there is real. Like, obviously, you don't have like a one-day turnaround to make a T-shirt. You have to make it if you get to the final, right? So you have to dump it every time you don't win.
It's super painful. I mean, for last summer in Detroit, we had this amazing shirt. If we had won, that's kind of based around sneaky, and I'm actually sad it's never going to see the light of day. But yeah, we put all these effort and printing into having all the stuff ready. And yeah, it's like, you know, after you lose, going back to your team room, you see this box of stuff. You're like, you know, someone dump that, please.
my favorite part about that show is just like how small like the like text on spring is under it. It's like 2020 LCS champion.
Yeah.
It's like spring.
Don't worry about split. Champions, yeah.
Spring.
But yeah, no, it's a great shirt. So I mean, one of the things that people always talk about in regards to your team, and happened again this year, was how you guys always manage to lose the offseason. So every season it starts off, you guys make roster changes, and people just complain on Reddit, oh, this roster is so shit, like they're gonna be like terrible, they don't care about winning, etc. And every season you guys seem to exceed expectations. Up until this season, it's always been like finals appearances and things like that. Now you guys are actually LCS champions. So what do you exactly do to like build rosters? Like, how do you see rosters? Like, how much do you actually value cost efficiency of players compared to like trying to build like real championship rosters? Like, where exactly is the line for you regarding that stuff?
I mean, that's a good question. It's really complicated. And I think like obviously, like when I see the feedback being super negative every year, it's frustrating. But I try to remind myself that the fans, like, they care a lot, and they see this player that, as far as they can tell, was like a decision was made with you know, blindly. But the thing is when we make decisions, like, you got to understand, like, for every stage game you see, there's 20x games that I have from scrims that I'm viewing, and tons of it. You know, there's tons of like solo queue data where our players are duo queuing that I'm also pulling data from. A lot of other interviews. So none of these decisions were made blindly. Like when we brought like Licorice up to replace Impact, we got a ton of shit. But the thing is every week we were scrimming against eUnited, and we saw frankly Licorice dumpstering Impact, and you know, Eric had been on Cloud9 on the Challenger team for quite a while before that. So I knew exactly who we were working with. We knew how dedicated he was, and we knew how good he could be. So it seemed like a huge risk to the public, but to us, we're like, wow, we just won the lottery. This is going to be amazing. He's going to actually be a fraction of the cost of Impact, and he's better. And so a lot of these moves I seem really confusing to our fans. Like, we feel actually super confident about it.
So how much of it is like you making the decision compared to like referring to or deferring to your players, your staff, coaches?
Yeah, exactly.
Like how much would you say
the final
you do?
decision?
Like, the final decision is mine. But I talk with my players a lot, and I talk with my coach a lot. And I talk with my data team that provides me a lot of data. Like this current iteration was the first time we actually had a data team to dive in and give me a ton of information, which that information, like specifically with the Vulcan trade, after looking at like the data that we pulled together, I realized he was the only support that would fit the box that we needed, which was an NA support that put in the same amount of effort as his teammates would, and had the right mindset. And so what that allowed me to do is have the confidence to go spend a shit ton of money on him. If I didn't have like that data and then the interviews with the players, the confidence of the coaches, there's no way I would have gone to 1.75 million on this guy.
By the way, when they say that 1.75 million, one thing I want to get at is because the two numbers everyone remembers from the offseason is the Hooney buyout was like 2.1 million or something, and then the contract rather, and then the Vulcan buyout for 1.7. The problem with that is when everyone then gives their opinion about whether it's too much, it's like, this is madness, guys. How can we know if it's too much if we don't know the reference point? Like, what are other buyouts? Like, what is another big guaranteed contract look like? So can you give us, like, was that an enormous buyout for that period in time? Like, were there other buyouts in the range of that in anywhere going on?
No. Dignitas set the market. And the thing is, like, what was the market? Well, I had the rest of the market. I had like EG. 5 other players. Yeah, it was EG. And essentially, like, EG was trying to get a price for me. I'm like, hey, until I get this Vulcan deal done, nothing can actually be done. And then when I came back with, like, this is the price I'm paying for, like, pretty much a rookie support. So you're going to pay a lot more. So because you're getting the MVP and like 3 other really high quality players. And of course they're like, what the fuck? Like, that's insane. I'm like, oh, that's the price if you want this guy. And thankfully there was a lot of people that were after Svenskeren and Zazel. There weren't very many options for guys like them.
So you say that, like, you're right. Factually, he was the MVP. Obviously, Zazel, he's been to Worlds, he's had performances. But I saw an interesting video where you said essentially that you just like bundled up all your problems and then just dumped them on someone else. So let's be real. Like, this is the time to swag, Jack. You just won the offseason hard, didn't you? Yeah. Like, you must have been loving it when the upper bracket final was just your rejects versus your team, and you won.
It was. I think we were doing the math on it. It was something 11. When you looked at the last 3 teams that were in playoffs, 11 of those 15 players are former Cloud9, which kind of blew my mind. But like, I did say that. I mean, it was in jest. Like,
yeah, of course,
they're obviously still really good players, but it was a great meme, and I love to fuck with EG management. I mean, but the thing is, like, they paid a shit.
Is there any reason why you like to just fuck with EG management specifically, or?
No, I love to fuck with all other teams. I mean, like, I don't care who. You're my enemy. I'm going to fuck with you, so I don't care.
That's respectable. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing personally against any of these people. It's just, I mean, I enjoy the banter, and I don't care if they come after me either. But the thing is like, yeah, that team was super expensive, but I guarantee, like, they got 3rd, nearly 2nd place. They're going to come into summer as one of the strongest teams. I guarantee, like, there's several other teams that would have paid that buyout to actually have them now after they saw what they did. So, like, maybe I didn't charge enough. I mean, when you think about it, like, FlyQuest, their entire organization, they got their initial LCS spot off of one of my boosted challenger spots.
The high team.
And so, like, there's so much like interesting stuff in there, like in history. And I think I sold in that spot for like $1 million. And
that hurts a little bit when you think about it now, doesn't it?
Yeah, where it's mind blowing, right? And
that should be 10 million.
I mean, in the value of that spot now, I mean, that was an incredible investment for them, and so I'm really happy that it worked out for them.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that we kind of talked about is like how C9 is known as like a team that's like very conscious of price, where like you have a bunch of other teams that like are just willing to fucking spend. Like obviously 100 Thieves, they brought in Bang and Someday last year, ended up getting 9th place. So how do you evaluate like trying to go for like championships compared to like how much money are you willing to spend? Like, because obviously Cloud9 hasn't brought in like any of these, like up until Vulcan, there hasn't been like these players that come into Cloud9 besides for maybe Impact with massive contracts, or it seems like Cloud9 is spending like millions for. So like, how much do you view like profitability versus just like winning? Like, is C9 like one of the teams that I guess is like more profitable than other orgs? I know TSM went out there and said that they're one of the, or I think C9 or TSM said maybe they were the only profitable org in LCS. Like, do you think that that's actually true? Like, how does this all?
That is, I'll just add as a piece of context, they were a little bit disingenuous when they said that, because as far as I know, what they mean is the entire TSM business might be profitable. Remember, their business is selling guides. It's like in FaZe Clan, the business is having the biggest streamers. The problem is when they say that, it's not like the team in LCS makes them $1 billion off t-shirts, So yeah, what do you think on this?
I mean, that's a really good context, Duncan. And the thing is if you were to look just at the eSports like brand, like I think just the eSports LCS team, I would say that Cloud9 is easily probably one of the best run teams out there. If you just look at the sponsors and the partners that we have, they're incredible. If you were to slice away the platform business, like the guides and stuff that TSM does, it definitely completely changes the picture. And for Cloud9, like, if I was to just look at the Cloud9 brand, I have other brands like involved. We're definitely profitable. Like if you like slice away like the Overwatch investments, it's a completely different company. Sure. And obviously, like when you have an expense like that, it's going to change the numbers. But if I was to slice away like the Overwatch business altogether, we're definitely profitable.
Overwatch seems relatively dead from what I'm seeing. I just see articles like every day about like, oh man, like these teams are paying $20 million and there's 16,000 people watching like the match, or 30,000 people watching the matches. So like,
I think it's
not awkward there, Dom.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, like that's why you're slicing away those numbers, right? That's why we're slicing them away. Like,
well, I mean, it's a large investment, right? And there was never an expectation for it to be profitable right away. And if you know, I can't go into the numbers specifically on that team right now, but if you look at like the Overwatch business and specifically Activision's business as a whole, they're crushing it. They're doing super well. So I'm confident it's going to be fine in the long term. We're definitely it's a rough time right now when your MVP leaves to go to another game. I know, that's painful. It's special, and it's super painful. With the fans of the game, and it's a real easy way to kick them. But it doesn't mean the game is dead. And I'll be really interested to see what the future brings there. I can't really get into the details on that.
This might shock people, but I'll give you an actual counterpoint, which is a devil's advocate position for the Overwatch League, which, by the way, the reason I say that might shock people is obviously I think the Overwatch League is garbage. I think it should be destroyed. I think it's garbage. But anyway, this is why it's genius, Dan, because I'm going to build that Jack there. I'm just used to talking to Dan from Cloud9, so it's on the brain. When you think about it, right, it doesn't actually matter if Overwatch League even succeeds in the long run, if it is everything it's built to be, because at the moment, right, the logic of coming into these leagues, if you're a big org, it's a bit like being an investor. Well, if you invest into an area like eSports, by the way, which is at the moment is really risky, like you have to be very shrewd with what you do. Even then, the variance can be insane. In the short term, in the long term, no one knows where it's going. When you do that, you come in knowing that. So what you do if you're an investor who have loads of money is you want your money to work for you, and you want some of your money to basically do something, whether it's win or lose, while you're not even doing anything. So as a result, you invest in like 10 things. And if you invest in 10 things, you know all 10 don't work. So that's why if you're a big team, I remember when the Overwatch League was just starting, and I said to an org, I won't mention which one they are, one of the big ones, I was like, but if you could get the LCS, because they were going to make LCS franchise, would you also want the Overwatch League though? And they basically told me, like, dude, I'd buy into every one of these leagues. Like, if they do a Call of Duty wasn't a thing at the time as a league, but like if they do a Call of Duty one, if they do a CSGO one, he said, I'll just go to my investors or other investors, get the seed money. Well, I'm just saying that as a term. It's obviously not the literal term, but I'll get the money I need to make the investment. And I would do it all, because the logic is, if 3 of them work, I want to be in those 3 definitely. And the 3 that work will be enormous in the future. And in the end, it won't even matter the 2 or 3 that don't work at that point in time. It's like the concept is you want your foot in the door, and then you want to let at that point you let the other people take over, and they make it work or it doesn't.
Yeah, that's a perfect counterpoint. And the thing is, it's like you need to be in that one investment that does really well, even if 9 of them fail. And additionally, just being part of that league allows me to build a really good relationship with Activision, and they're going to be involved in a lot of different things. And so, and maybe Overwatch League isn't as great as we want it to be, but maybe the next league will be. And just me having that relationship will help me.
So, from my understanding, is like league contracts are way higher than Overwatch. Even though like I know like the buy-ins are similar, the actual players get paid way more in League of Legends. And something that I've been hearing for years is this idea that like the bubble's going to burst, like all these players are getting overpaid in LCS, and then there's going to be a day where, you know, like because of like sponsorships, because of viewership, people aren't able to like dish out these $1 million contracts, etc. And, you know, we're going to see a bunch of things just go down in that area. Do you actually believe like that philosophy? Do you like see that argument happening? Do you think LCS players in general are overpaid by organizations? Or do you think that like league is in a fine spot for like people to continue earning these?
The salaries inflated, basically.
Yeah.
It clearly some teams have massively overpaid some players, and I think that has led to a bit of inflation in general. I think that Cloud9's gotten ourselves into a pretty good spot. But it's going to be really interesting we're seeing, there's a lot of movement on the economy right now. We're seeing that a lot of teams are having difficulty, raising, and how is that going to impact things? It will definitely. And so, it remains to be seen, but Cloud9 is in a situation that, we've raised enough so we're really stable for a really long time. And the thing is, what's really cool is we have fantastic partners, so we're profitable, so it doesn't matter. So I'm really happy with the situation and what Cloud9 is paying, and we can continue to do it. I don't know what that means though for other teams, because I do know that some teams aren't really well run.
Yep. By the way, just to give Dom some info here, I'll just say it like this again, because Dan's here, I don't want because Jack's here, I don't want to make it too awkward and forcing him into answers. So I'll just say this: to my knowledge, there is not a literal salary cap in the Overwatch League, Dom, but there's something sort of like one. And let's just say the contracts never get too crazy and too out of control, and there's no one being signed for $2 million a year or anything like that. So as a result, essentially, within that league, because they basically launched with all the owners involved, they sort of set it up so that it wouldn't go quite as ridiculous as it did in LCS and League of Legends. Because the problem in League of Legends was, especially before franchising, even if you're the guy who's at the moment paying the most and you're winning all the championships, you just need a guy to come in who has 10x your capital, and then he just does the same thing to you. Now he just guys all the players, and then you're sat there wait a minute, I was this. So in the end, the big fish always eat the small fish in that one, and it's kind of it's not really even the good for the person who wins, because they don't end up making the money. It's almost like a race to the bottom at that point in time. You're always going to wreck each other financially, and in the end, you're just trying to survive. So that's no way to build a league. The whole concept of a league is supposed to be like the NFL. Believe it or not, as much as fans might not know, in the NFL, absolutely, the champions of the NFL want the Cleveland Browns to be good. They want those matches to sell out. They want all the attention to be great for everyone to make money and then profit share. So it's not the approach that you actually want people to be wrecking each other with this amount of money. It needs to be within reason, and then it needs to be like a game where we each have our pieces. Maybe I have slightly more than you because I'm doing better in business, but I don't have 50 times more than you. And then the logic is, now let's see who's actually good at the game. What's your strategy? So Jack's strategy often is obviously get rookies and find out which rookies are worth it, or scout someone who maybe is an under-the-radar pick. Or probably the best one of all time was the Jensen pickup, because it looks so obvious now, but at the time, that was a massive rehabilitation project. That could have gone wrong 50 million ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I first signed Jensen, it was, I think, around October the year before he actually joined the team. So it was
2014.
Yeah, it was 6 months before. He was straight up banned. And I remember talking with
imagine getting banned from LCS. What the hell?
Yeah, I was talking with Nick from LCS, and I was just like, hey, this kid ever gonna get unbanned? It's I don't know, man. Promises. And so I just did a deal with Jensen. I'm like, hey, just grind solo queue. If you're, and depending on the number of accounts you have in the top 10, you'll get additional bonuses. And should you become unbanned, if I can sign you to the team, if you basically get the starting spot within X number of weeks, you join the team. And if I don't give you that starting spot, you're free to go wherever you want. And that was a deal that we basically had. And then that gave me the confidence to kind of, to basically make the decisions I needed to make on Cloud9 with my roster.
I think that was such a surprise to most people when he joined, because not only was C9 I think the longest standing 5-man team at that point in LCS, but it was also just the nature of your team was supposed to be this really friendly, happy team. Everyone was really relatively positive, at least in the public side, etc. And Jensen was a player that was notoriously toxic in EU. So I remember there was a lot of backlash from the community regarding that change in branding. Were you worried about that having a significant impact to Cloud9, or was it just kind of the type of thing where it's you just wanted to have a better team?
So I just wanted to have a better team. The thing is this is actually a good tie into Double Lift. I saw the impact of having one player putting in less effort than the rest. And when High was putting in less time, he had wrist issues and other things going on. And as try as you might, like it was really painful for the guys who were grinding a ton of games to watch that, then see him have his champion pool be so limited on stage. And what was happening is I could tell that they were losing motivation, and the natural conclusion of that is a team would just fall apart. And this is back in the days when you could get relegated, and I refused for us to be in that situation. So I was more concerned about the team losing its spot than fans hating me. Of course, I cared about it, but I needed to make the decisions that I did to ensure that we could still stay in LCS.
How do you rationalize or look back and reflect on the period you had with Jensen? Because the problem is, right, if like just to give like a thought exercise, if he'd have retired when he'd left Cloud9, he hadn't have gone to Team Liquid and had all the success there, right? In that scenario, he would have been considered like one of the best players to never win LCS. And so it would have kind of sucked to have had one of the like Hall of Fame players. And then that's the period when he never won anything. So how do you reflect back on that?
It's tough, because we got so close so many times. And what kept happening is that, we'd start the split like just with a fire, and you could look back historically, we were often like number one in the regular season halfway through the split. And then coming into playoffs, you could just see everyone like, oh, cool, we made playoffs. Like we can relax now. And inevitably, like as we got to playoffs, like our scrims would just go to shit. And the guys would be playing like Path of Exile and World of Warcraft and everything but what they should be focusing on. And it was super painful. And every like the next year, or the next split, I'd be like, okay, guys, you remember how we lost? Remember how bad that felt? We can never do that again. And everyone's like, yeah, we're not doing that again. We're coming in fighting. We're gonna, crush it this next split. And then it would happen again. At the end of 2019, like the spirit of all the players was just broken, and the coach was broken. And so that's what we had to do, massive changes. But looking back, on Jensen specifically, it feels real bad that he never got an LCS championship with us, because he carried us for years, and it sucks that he didn't get to raise that trophy with us.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, one thing that you kind of mentioned there was like just coaching staff, which I wanted to ask you about, because it seems like you guys have like one of the biggest coaching staff, or maybe not the biggest, but in terms of like pro players, it's like almost every coach that comes into Cloud9, Reapered, Rapid Star, most recently Reignover, West Rice. It's like you guys always recruit pro players to become coaches. Do you think the pro players are just like the best coaches you can get? Like, is that just the mentality of C9? Like you need to have somebody like that, because we've seen other organizations try to bring in people that maybe have like football background. We saw TSM try with the guy that was like a baseball coach before. Yeah, Woodbuck.
I mean, why would you bring in like a hockey coach to coach an NFL team? That's fucking crazy. Like, I don't even know why people do that. And so it's totally irrelevant. Yeah, they can bring like an understanding of a system, and they can be like they can assist in making sure that the system you have is good, but you can't actually have that guy running the team. That's insanity. And so I was lucky, and thankfully, Papa Smithy introduced me to Reapered. And before that, we didn't really have true coaches. And once I saw the way Reapered operated, I was like, holy shit, what is this? This is like it was like my eyes were open, the whole team's eyes were open, and we were going to trial several different coaches. We had Fly ready to where he was going to trial with us the following week. But that 1 week of coaching with Reaper was so good, and we learned so much. Like everyone was like, nope, you're not going anywhere. You're staying with us.
I think the fear that other owners have is regarding like the structure element of it. It's like, okay, so you might know the game really well, but are you going to be able to like manage a team, manage interpersonal relationships, things like that? And I think that the other organizations. So, for example, when I played in 2015 into 2016 in that summer, I don't know if you remember, we had like a coach named Randy, who was a football coach, knew nothing about the game, and like the idea was supposed to be that because they have like degrees in like education, things like that, they're really good at managing the interpersonal relationships. So you can have like a strategy coach and a like head coach that is more focused on structure. Was there ever any issues with like structure with having like former players be coaches, like them not being as disciplined as you'd expect from somebody in that position, or has it just been kind of like smooth sailing because of just like the just knowledge that they have based on the game?
There absolutely has been like a learning curve. When players convert to coaches, they still for a while act like players, where they don't realize that they actually need to be an example of what we expect from all our players. Because if a player see we tell the players, hey, you need to get up, eat a good meal, work out like with focus, and then the coach shows up late, he doesn't eat, he kind of fucks around in the workout, like he's setting the example, and even the players are super motivated, they will be demotivated. And what happens is really interesting. If the coach doesn't actually lead by example through all these other things that are not related with the game, the players won't listen to the coach when it comes to his expertise. It's totally symbiotic. And so the coach needs to be example in all areas outside the game as well, for the players to even listen to their advice inside. We've seen like several players lose like faith in a coach because the coach wasn't actually acting professionally outside the scrims. And it's really interesting to see how important that when a player converts to a coach, they need to set the example of what they want their players to be doing.
That's one area as well where I'd like to hear your thoughts on Reapered as a person, as a coach, because if people don't know, like Reapered is far from the stereotypical Korean. Like he almost has like I would almost describe it as like a street vibe to him. He has like a unique personality in that sense. So I feel like for a start off, like he's someone who you could like banter with and joke with in a way that you can't really with like the Korean that just arrives in the LCS is just coming to like the culture clash and stuff. So how has it been to work with him in that respect and him working with players, trying to command their respect and all that?
He's a really unique, incredible person. And like when I think people don't realize, like when he joined Cloud9, he spoke zero English, like nothing. And we hired a translator to be a manager, Robin. He basically follow him around and translate for him on the fly everywhere he went. And what Reapered would do is like, yes, he would do the coaching stuff, but after the scrims were over, he would like sit behind the player while the player was, either playing League or watching like a VOD of something or watching just anime. It didn't matter. But he spent time with each and every single player, like hours of his time just chatting with them. And the player would be like, say, I'm hungry. Hey, you want to learn how to cook? And then Reaper would go into the kitchen, teach a kid how to cook and be talking about stuff. So he invested a ton of time on getting to know these guys personally, building a really good relationship with them. And in doing so, he also became fluent in English in just like a couple of years because he spent so much time.
He speaks his own variant of it, I will say.
He speaks sneaky English.
English outside. That's a good point because I've been working with him for so long, I don't even notice anymore.
There you go.
And if you get outside League of Legends like vocabulary, it starts getting a little rough. But it is as far as like inside our team, we communicate really well.
Yeah, it's sneaky English. That's what I always said it had. It has vibes of his like vocabulary, things like that.
No, it was actually funny because I guess like after a year or two of him working with us, and he said he was speaking with like other English speakers, and they were kind of shocked at his vocabulary. And he's like, I realized the words that I'm saying are actually super inappropriate, and I didn't realize it, but Sneaky taught him some things. Yeah.
I've got a question then. Listen, obviously now the guy's won an LCS for you, like it's vindicated the choice, etc. I mean, I'll totally say I was one of the people who said I thought maybe his time had been and gone. Like he'd had a lot of chances, he had a lot of talent, he hadn't won before, and even worse, this might sound weird to a fan, but the fact that you were always so close, that's what actually made me very nervous. Because actually, I always say this, if someone has 5 chances to win and they don't win any 5 times, it's not like, oh, they're definitely going to win the 6 times. Like, if anything, they've shown they're really good at not winning when they're in the position. Yeah. So that can be a concern. So was there ever any of that? I mean, listen, you guys, as you said, you've been in so many finals, so many semis, so many game 5s. Like,
Jensen?
I don't know, you have to think about that sometimes.
I think it was 9 finals we've been in now. And, it's actually insane, right? And we've only won 3 of them and only one of those with Reapered. And I think like what it showed was that we were really consistent and obviously getting into playoffs and getting into finals. And we were able to forge a team together to be good on stage. But we definitely lacked the stamina to get through to the end. And I think that a lot of what went on in this last offseason was addressing some of those issues. And I can tell you that, like, as we approached playoffs, I was terrified because I'd been there so many times and seen the lack of motivation happen over and over that I was just like walking around on eggshells, looking for the next failure, looking for that player to be playing Path of Exile or something else, and ready to jump on it. But it was actually amazing because of the work we'd done in the off season and we'd hired the right people and we had a really good mindset of like just focusing on what's right in front of us every day. The players were policing themselves. The coaches didn't even have to like police the players. The players are completely policing themselves on staying focused the entire time. And for the first playoffs, like since I've been with Cloud9, I didn't have to play like the bad cop role of chasing players around and telling them to focus. They were totally focused on their own.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually surprised to hear that being cited as like, I guess, your main concern with what the team was, or like the main thing that you boil it down to with those previous rosters, because from the outside, most people just thought it was like pure lack of talent. And I think that's why like the outcry from like the outcry for roster changes ended up coming about, was because people perceived it as you guys just didn't have good enough players to win. But from your perspective, from being within the team, you think it was mainly just due to the fact that players were not as motivated as possible coming into playoffs. Like I think that's
like you just said, like 11 players in the top 3 or whatever were former Cloud9 players. So if anything, the players look awesome.
Yeah, the thing is, if you're looking at our scrim records, like over the last several years, you would see we're winning something like, at least 80% of the games through the first 90% of the season. And then you would see this stark difference in playoffs where the players, like we were suddenly like 50-50 or worse. And but in every single time you would think back in history, like, oh yeah, they started playing some WoW expansion. Oh yeah, Path of Exile was a thing. Oh yeah, they're playing Fortnite. Like there was always like this lack of focus. Like once we checked off the box, we're going to playoffs, all steam was lost. And we had to identify what was causing that. There's multiple reasons, and let's stamp those out.
Yeah, I think that's actually really interesting, because you'd think that a team that makes playoffs every split wouldn't really care if they made playoffs. Like that wouldn't be the ending point for them. Like I can't believe that there was like a sense of relief when making playoffs for a team like that always is making finals. Like it would seem like the huge motivator would be like, hey, like let's not lose in finals for like the 4th split in a row. So
no, it's really it's foreign to me too, because like it's not natural for me. I'm always kind of pushing super hard, and a lot of it had to be with finding players that that don't give up and don't like Sven is a great example. That guy's a monster.
He's a grinder.
Like, you go just look at the number of games he's put in. He's still rank one in the United States, and he's just grinding his ass off, and he loves it. I actually think with us winning, we've unlocked an even scarier Sven, because he just seems super happy and incredibly motivated right now. And it's pretty wonderful to see.
We have to talk about that, because that also has to be a mad, satisfying, but interesting story you can give us. I'll tell you right now, everyone except maybe the most loyal Cloud9 fans, they thought you were picking up someone else's problem by getting Sven. Remember, every TSM fan wanted this guy gone. I can even tell you internally, they weren't fans of him at TSM at the end, mate. Like, that was a really acrimonious relationship, and he himself didn't want to be there. So in that scenario, like, what did you see in him as a player? Like, if I'd have gone on any of these talk shows at the end of the offseason, everyone would have said he's a bust. Like, he's washed. Maybe he was only ever good with Mithy. There's a million narratives were swirling around. So how did you come to want to pick him up?
I mean, again, this is like, it's not just even just a couple, like one split of scrims. For 2 years, we saw him like just dominant in scrims. Like it was super frustrating to see him just shit on our bot lane, split after split in scrims. And then even before that, like when he was on G2, like we would go to Worlds and we'd scrim against them, and he was just incredible. And he was incredible in the game, and then outside the game, we'd go have meals with him and stuff. And he's just an incredible person. And so we were like, me and Reapered, like, we'd have our private conversations like, oh man, what could we do if we got Sven? Like, and I would be hitting up TSM like, man, things aren't looking so good. Yeah, and just be clear, I talk directly to the owners.
Exactly, yes.
And
it's good you clarify that around Thorin, or he might go off, you know.
I just don't want people saying that.
Yeah, and so and like when we got the chance, I remember just like telling Reaper like, "Hey, we got the chance. We can actually talk to this guy." It was super exciting that we got the opportunity. But the thing is like, you know, he definitely had like some baggage from that situation at TSM, and he wanted to make sure that he was ended up in a place where he was happy, like he was concerned, like who's this blabber kid? Like, why the hell is Dennis leaving? And
he's a really intense guy, isn't he? Like, I think the funniest thing about him is, dude, he's like one of those 1920s movies of the fast talkers. Like, hey, man, what are you doing there? What are you going to like? He talks so fast, but he's just so into it.
Yeah, like I think Reaper's actually said this before that he thinks that Sven was the MVP of the team, and because he doesn't actually talk all that much inside the game, but his thoughtful feedback outside the game is incredible and really motivating. And, you know, say maybe we have a bad game. And I think we lost a game to EG in the semifinals or whatever they call it now in the new bracket system. But I think it was the winner semifinals.
Winner bracket final, I think.
Yeah. Maybe that was it. Yeah. And so we lost the game, and you could see the players were kind of like, oh shit, we lost. It's like our second loss on stage for the entire year. And, you know, players are like, should we change the way we do stuff? And Sven is like, no, we know how we play. We've been scrimming this way for like an entire year. This is what we're going to do. We're not changing the way we play, and this is what we're going to do. And like all the rest, like all the players just settled down. They're like, yeah, you're right. We're gonna come back and crush this shit. And like having a guy like that is super experienced, very direct, and has a ton of confidence in his abilities, is night and day difference from what we've been dealing with in the past.
So coming into it, I know there was like testimony from former TSM players that like he was relatively like toxic in TSM, or he would like lose like faith in teammates and just like have like maybe not a directly toxic attitude where he's like flaming people, but just like he loses faith in people. Was that ever like a worry when you picked him up? Were you ever worried about like attitude issues or anything like that, or were you just kind of focused on the fact that he was such like a great player? Did you have any idea that this was like a thing? Did any of this come to you when you're picking him up?
Yeah, I knew about it. I knew about it, but we had a lot of conversations on what our ideal team situation was like, and what our expectations were ahead of. And there were differences. Like it's mandatory for our players to work out and to eat and get sleep. And we're really like on a lot of the stuff I control outside the game where we ask a lot. We have high expectations. And I remember him, he was just like, this is not how we did it on G2. We kind of led a degenerate life. We don't need to have someone making us work out, blah, blah, blah. And he didn't like it. But what was cool about him, he's like, well, you know, boss, if that's what you think it needs to happen for me to play at our greatest and our teammates to play at our greatest, then I'm going to do it. And he was grumpy about it, but he did it. And what was really cool is at the end of the split, in some of the interviews, he said that Cloud9 gives us what we need, not necessarily what we want. And that's really true. And he bought into that we're doing what we need as a team to make our entire team better. And what's really funny is towards the end of the split, he loves the work. He loves working out in the morning. He loves like the social interaction you get through it, and the stamina we get. Basically, when you're in a best of 5 situation, you're going to games 4 and game 5. Like the team that doesn't basically outlast, doesn't get tired, is going to end up winning that thing, and you get that from working out.
Right, being as in the off seasons every year, and this one particularly, obviously with the whole Vulcan, like I think it's been said on enough shows. Basically, the whole support pool and jungle pool of the NA players, that was like what was like gridlocking the whole thing, because it's like if I get him, but then I can't trade for this person because I don't know if that, and everyone was just waiting to see which piece gets moved where.
It's not even a pool. It's a puzzle.
It was like 3 people or something. Yeah,
it's a teacup. It's pretty bad.
It was like the smallest game of musical chairs ever. There's just like 2 chairs. Yeah. But anyway, 5 people trying to get in them. So when you had
like 1 chair and like 2 stools, so it was pretty bad.
When another player from outside that was potentially going to be involved in the mix for a number of teams, as we've now found out, was actually really Upset, who ended up going to Origin in Europe. And he's been rumored actually for the last 2 years going back to other different teams, and your team was one of the ones connected with him. Was this someone actually that you were interested in? And if so, it leads to my other question, which is, he's a perfect example to me of why there hasn't been as big a talent drift from Europe to North America in terms of the best players as people would would have assumed when you get all the millions and millions of dollars that you guys can offer. Because if you go and you talk to a guy like that, I've had him on my shows, they'll just tell you straight up. The problem is, at the moment, they don't perceive it that they will win in NA. Whereas if they have a chance to get in like a top 3 European team, they'll just take it even if it's half the salary, legitimately. So what is it like to try and make the pitch for these guys? Because at the moment, it doesn't feel like anyone's cracked the code. Like, there's been a couple have come through, but even then, I feel like some of those haven't worked out. So no one's really nailed how you get the big European names that you want.
Yeah, the first time I ran into this problem is when I knew Jensen wanted to go, and I started I got the approval to talk to Caps, and Caps, he didn't care like how much money was going his way. He felt like, I'm gonna have international success with G2, and that's not something you can actually even offer me. So I'm not interested. I don't care. And that was the first time we're like, oh wow.
It really be like that.
It's like that, and I felt pretty bad that like as a region we just weren't considered like a contender, and the same thing happened with Upset. And, my data team got back to me with about like 6 or 7 80 carries that fit like the mold of what I wanted, and he was on that list, and we talked to him, and he was like, I've got something going on here that you just can't actually match. It doesn't really, the dollars don't really matter. It's what I can see with this team. Can I build success with it? And so he was out.
Yeah, makes sense. One thing that people have kind of cited about your team, like I heard Svenskeren say something similar to this, is that there's like just a certain environment that you guys have cultivated in Cloud9, like just a very like positive environment that leads to success, and that's why like you see players normally play their best League of Legends when they're with Cloud9, and a bunch of people, like for example Sven from last year, I mean he's the most recent example, looked relatively bad on TSM, joined C9, looks a lot better. Like, is there anything that you really pinpoint as the reason why your environment is so much better for these players to thrive in? Do you think it's just like this schedule, the working out, things like that, or do you think it's like some type of like comfort or stability that the players feel when they're within your organization that they might not have in other orgs? Or like, how do you think that really comes about?
It's super tough for me to tell, because like the only time I've been with another org was with TSM, and that was a long time ago, and things were very different back then. But I don't think any other owner is as in touch with their teams as much as I am. And specifically League of Legends is a game that I spend a ton of time with. But like I'm with them pretty much every single day, and I've got a personal relationship with each player, with the coaches, with the managers, and I definitely am very involved in that. We try to be really honest in our discussion, and we don't try to hide things and let things build up. I mean, the thing is, like, I would like to say that we have this perfect environment, but we failed last year, so I can't claim that. We fucked up last year, and so we've done a lot to try to fix those issues. But I do think that because we have a lot of very motivated, caring managers and coaches, and I'm involved, I don't think another team has that type of like setup where they have so much interaction with ownership, managers, and really good coaches.
You know that like now infamous story, and by the way, based on my sources, guess what? I have sources inside TSM, guys. Believe it or not, some people don't dislike me. Not many people, to be fair, but I cultivate those friends very closely. Like I've heard that whole narrative of like when things really go, when the shit hits the fan, you're about 5 seconds in TSM from Reggie coming in and being like, right, this is what's going to happen in playoffs. This is what's going to happen in Worlds. He basically comes in and he does the drill sergeant routine, which is now like almost a classic routine. And it's worked many times, by the way. Even if it's just a short-term thing, it has worked. So the question is this, right? Because that's now so famous a story and people repeat it as a narrative. The problem is, again, it's like with the buyouts. It's like, well, guys, actually, technically, we don't know what any of the other teams do. Like, we're just assuming they don't do that. So has Jack ever come in and given them what? Listen, in English football, there used to be a term. It was called the hairdryer, because the idea is that you're shouting at the guy, and it's almost like you're just blowing his hair like back with all the power of your voice, So has Jack ever had to come in and lay down the law?
Well, I'm always there. So like, it's not like I'm just coming in.
Okay.
I'm literally always there. I'm listening on every single scrim. Like on the team meetings, I'm actually interacting there. So I don't have to come in and be like that hammer to smash people. They're because I'm always there. Like, and so I think one of the things is that like there have been obviously infamously a few like really tough moments that were actually unfortunately filmed and put out there, like when Jensen and Smoothie and who else? Oh, and Sneaky were benched. So I've had those tough conversations, and that's been actually seen. But I don't have the like, coming out of nowhere type of moments like Reggie has to come like set the team straight, because I've always been involved from the very beginning.
Yeah. No, they do make it seem like in TSM it's like that Gooby time meme, like he just busts in the door and everyone's like, oh shit, Reggie's here. No, like, you're all gonna make playoffs right now, motherfuckers.
I mean, when you think about it, like Reggie plays a really vital part in other parts of the business that are completely unrelated to the LCS team. He spends a lot of time like on Blitz.gg and other things that they're focusing on, and so he isn't there on a daily basis, and he that's a big part of their business, so he's spending time where the money's coming from, which makes sense. And so for him, I think it is one of those things like, oh, I guess I need to put down like this other project that I'm working on that actually makes us a lot of money and go yell at these other kids for a bit. And then he goes back to his primary job.
By the way, we should definitely talk about that, not just gloss over it. When you just literally benched a whole bunch of the best starters in your team. And remember, dude, that was one of the moments that was almost a breaking point, because I saw so many Cloud9 fans who were like, I'd love to know like the stats on if like a bunch of flares just disappeared off Reddit that weekend or whatever. Because
I'm sure.
This is the thing. Because it sort of worked, mate. Like obviously you made it to Worlds, you had the big performance, and in fact, later got to use these rookies now to great success. That's all great, because if it all works out. In the alternate universe where maybe it doesn't, and maybe some of those players either you lose, maybe someone like a Jensen, you just lose him. He doesn't mentally want to come back. Did you ever worry about that? I mean, there's an alternate universe where maybe it's a very different Cloud9, and now maybe you don't have to put all your trust in Reaper because it didn't work.
My faith in Reapered was never broken, but I do definitely remember the two of us sitting over beers and just looking at each other going, this fucking has to work, right? Please tell me it's going to work, because we feel like we're doing everything right, but shit keeps falling apart. I mean, we were just blowing it up in scrims every week. The players seem super focused, and they get on stage and fail over and over. I mean, we literally were 10th place halfway through the split. And finally, the thing is with rookies, like I think one of the hardest things, and Dominic, I'm sure you can like attest to this, is that the way you play in scrims is very different than you play on stage. And the risks that you take in scrims and your opponents take in scrims does not happen on stage. And so we had all these rookies that were trying to play the way they did like in our scrims. And they're like, these guys aren't taking any risks. They're being super safe. They can't get shit done. And they didn't know actually how to close a game out on stage. And those weeks of losses were,
it was always
obviously
a throw.
Exactly. And it was a combination of training up like some of our rookies to actually play correctly on stage and understand the difference between scrims and stage, and seeing Jensen, like literally Jensen got benched, and like he went from like a Diamond 4 player to like top challenger player within 2 weeks. And so he completely changed the way he played.
Yeah, no, I definitely saw the changes there. What gave you the confidence to like even bring, for example, like, so Golden Glue didn't have much success with that team. Like, he was obviously one of the people that was subbed in for Jensen, and you guys lost a bunch of games. Then you kept Zeyzal in the roster, you kept Blabber in the roster, for the most part. Like, Golden Glue just didn't have much time winning on stage. What gave you the confidence, or like what gave the team the confidence to go and rely on him when you guys were down like 2-1 in the TSM series, for example? Like, everyone kind of viewed that player as somebody that everyone's looked at, that like, had his opportunity and failed. Like,
bust, yeah,
people just viewed him as a bust. So like, how did you go through that, like, I guess getting over that mental hurdle of like, hey, we've seen this guy fail a lot, but we still believe in him to like really come through in clutch moments? Like, that seemed like such a crazy change. Was that all Reapered, or did you have like some say in like putting him in those moments, etc.?
It was, by that point, by the time we got to playoffs, like we'd been through the fire. We'd been through the fire together, because like, I remember thinking like we were like in this little eye of the storm, because you go outside, like the center of that storm, like the world hated us. The casters were shitting on us. Our fans wanted like my head. But inside we were all working super hard trying to make this thing work. And we built a lot of trust in each other. We did a ton of scrims to look at, to where we felt like, hey, this is going to work. We also felt like we needed to mix it up to actually shake our opponents to get something happening. Each player kind of came with their own set of skills that could change the outcome of the game. And we felt like if we didn't make the change, we were going to lose, because we needed to mix up the game. And we had practiced some certain things that we felt would be effective, and thank God they were.
Mm-hmm. Was it just a thing where, Svenskeren and Golden Glue were like an entity that played together in scrims? Like, did you ever think of just subbing in like one and not the other? Like, how did that exactly work out? Because I mean, it pretty much was Jensen Blabber, or it's Golden Glue and Svenskeren. It was the Swole Bros versus, I don't know what the other guys were called.
It was super interesting, like the anti-swole guys.
Yeah, the anti-swole guy. Yeah, the
scarecrows.
The scarecrows. I like that. What the hell?
But like, dude, it was just really interesting because Blabber, like the way he played was insanely aggressive, and so aggressive that Jensen essentially had to take the role of like, save a Blabber. They better have some shields or heals or something to basically keep, to use Lulu and Oriana, like to keep Blabber alive. And that synergy was really effective. We saw it in scrims. It was super good. Like that at that time, our academy team had mostly LCS scrims. And we were just beating the shit out of like LCS teams. I think it was Optic was like one of our big partners. And I remember feeling bad because our academy team was like 5-0ing, or at that time it was 6 games, like 6-0ing Optic before their LCS matches. But they built a really good synergy where they worked together, and Jensen was basically like, okay, Blabber's going to carry me. I'm going to keep that kid alive. It was just interesting. I feel like Dennis and Jensen together, no one was really like kind of driving what was going to be happening with that synergy. But like with Grayson and Dennis, like Grayson would be making shots on what he was going to do, and Dennis would be supporting him, and it worked out really well. And it was kind of the opposite, where Blabber's like, I'm fucking going in, and Jensen was chasing him around, just shielding and healing him, trying to keep him alive. And so that matchup just worked. And they brought some really different things to the table, and for us, just mixing it up in the games was effective.
That makes sense.
By the way, we have to ask this question: how does one get rid of the MVP of the league? How does someone come to the conclusion, right? The guy everyone in the league said was the best player in the entire league. I need to get rid of him, actually. It's time to replace him.
I mean, that wasn't initially like the plan. Like, I got the infamous list from Dennis. Like, it was just like,
we can talk about that in a sec.
When I saw the list, I'm like, so
which team do you want to go to?
This is code for get me the fuck out of here, right? Because it was real clear. I'm like, and I think something to clarify, it wasn't like get me one guy on this list and I'll stay. It's like, no, my teammates will consist from this list. Replace everybody. I don't want any of the players right now. I don't want
basically make the Avengers.
Yeah, you need to change this thing. And I'm like, well, these guys, this is impossible. He's like, yeah, guess what that means? Get me out. And it was actually really, it was really good timing for me, because I was talking to Dignitas, and these buyouts were insane. And I'm thinking, I've got 2 players that I have a ton of confidence in. Dennis is like, he's an incredible guy to work with. Super good teammate, incredibly skilled, and Blabber also just up and coming. Like he's a demon. The guy's insane. He's so fucking good. In the scrims, when we were like scrimming Damwon, he was having back at Worlds, he was having winning records against these guys, and where Dennis was falling on his face. And so we had a ton of trust in Blabber. Blabber, when I asked Blabber, what do you want to do? Like, what's your goals for the future? He's like, I don't want to leave Cloud9. I want to build with you. I think we can do some cool stuff. So I had one guy who's like, get me the fuck out of here. I got one guy who's like, I want to build with you. I trust both of their play. It's really simple. And then I've got this insane buyout, for this support that I have to have. And I got this MVP and EG with a big bank of cash. I'm like, oh, this, like, find out how much Dignitas wants to charge me. Charge a lot more to these guys. So I mean, I ended up winning on both ends. So it worked out really well for me.
Did you think there was like a really big skill gap between him and Zeyzal? Because you did have an NA support at the time in Zeyzal, and it seems like it just feels like you just needed to have Vulcan. Did you feel like it just wasn't going to work, or was there like conflict within Zeyzal and the rest of the team, or like how exactly did that work out?
Like on a personal level, I love Zeyzal. He's like a really good person. It's super interesting guy to talk with. But I don't think he really bought into our system, like the way we worked, and so there was friction there. And there had been friction throughout his entire stay with Cloud9. So, and also we didn't know what the hell was wrong with the bot lane, why they performed so badly. Because if you just looked at Zeyzal's solo queue, he's a very highly skilled, smart player with incredible communication and a good person. So I didn't. It's not that I didn't think he was good, but he wasn't. Whatever was going on in the bot lane, it just didn't work. Our coaches were so frustrated. We're trying to sit down with Zeyzal and Sneaky, find out what's the matchups, what do you care about, what do you want to play, and both of them were like, I don't know, I don't know what's good, I don't know what's bad, I have no idea.
Well, it wasn't Lux. Let me just tell you from watching your games, the Lux support did not work out.
Yeah, and the thing is, I'm not willing. I mean, to Frank, I don't know why it didn't work, but it didn't work, and nobody from players, coaches, or myself wanted to try it again, and so we just thought let's move on to something else, and let me package up these players to EG and get a buyout that I need to be able to buy Vulcan and still have money in the bank. So it worked out. I think it really worked out well for everybody. I think Zeyzal's on a great team with really good funding, a really bright future. I feel like Bang him and Bang work really well together. Bang is incredible. So I think it really, one of those really rare win-win situations that worked out for everybody.
Let's imagine that instead of Svenskeren, because as you say, when you find out that you need to get basically the whole team has to be these players who, if anyone doesn't remember that episode, you can go back and obviously watch the VOD on YouTube or whatever. There'll be a million comments. So we just revealed the list of it's basically the most unobtainable players in the world and or the most expensive players in the world. But let's imagine, right, that he didn't give you a ridiculous premise. Let's say he just says, if you just get me one of these players off the list, you just get me one of them. You get me a Chovy, or you get me, as you said, there's a whole bunch of them that you could have got. Deft or something. Yeah, exactly. You just get me one of these players and I'll stay.
Showmaker.
Do you think you would have done it? Would you have moved to get one of those players?
It wasn't that simple because he was so clearly unhappy at Cloud9.
I think it's hypothetical though.
Yeah. I mean, it's the thing. Even if he said given everything else was the same, right? And the list was just reasonable. Get this one player. I don't think I would have kept him anyways because he wasn't bought into what we were doing anymore, right. And I could tell he wanted to do something else. But so if you were to say change his attitude, and he was actually talking to me because basically all conversation was happening through his agent. I wasn't even talking to him directly, which is for me doesn't feel good, and it also makes the conversation super cumbersome. Trying to understand what Dennis wants through an agent, and the agent actually doesn't even understand esports at all.
Dude, Jack's so anti-poaching, he doesn't even talk to his own players directly.
right, and exactly, and that's what was going on. It was just okay, this whole thing feels bad, and so it wasn't. Yeah, the list was get me these players. These are the players I want to. But even if it was just I just want one guy. If all the other variables are still the same, I would have still done the same thing.
Was it interesting to you that there was no European players on that list? That it was all NA players and Koreans? Because, I mean, Svenskeren himself, European player, etc. Was that just a surprising factor?
I think it's interesting. Every time we would travel to Worlds, he actually built good relationships with a lot of the players from Korea or from China. So he was always playing with all these different pros and I think having a good time. So I think he felt a lot of confidence that he could play with players from China or from Korea without having any sort of difficulty. So I think I didn't notice it at the time, but now that you pointed out, that's kind of interesting.
I mean, I think also the other angle to me would be he knows Cloud9's a super well-funded organization. He knows in theory, I'd explain it like this. It's not that Cloud9 won't spend money. It's that it has to make sense that they'd spend the money on this person. There's other teams who will literally just say, here's a list of 15 people. Get whichever one you can. Start at the top, work to the bottom, get one of them and pay whatever it costs. And then that's how they build their team. Like they get the big names and then they figure out where the pieces fit. So if I'm Svenskeren, it's not even necessarily that I 100% want to leave. But if I'm unhappy with how it currently is, then maybe my angle is this. I'll stay. And you know what? You might be one of the only people who could get me one of these people. This is a scenario where you didn't want all of them, obviously, if you just wanted one. Yeah. Like, there's not many teams could make that happen. It's basically the Team Liquid, Cloud9. There's only a few could really do it. Like, because as I say, you would sort of have to move heaven and earth to get a trophy or something like that.
Right. And if you look at EG was ready to do that. Like they were making massive bids. And I feel like he actually ended up on the team that's going to support him financially in a way that I probably wouldn't, because it has to really make sense to me. Like you said, and I'm glad you brought this up. I have no problem spending an insane amount of money on a player. I have paid the biggest buyout in history of LCS at this point, and it's not even close. But it does have to actually make sense more than just a name. And I have to really believe in that the player is super passionate and is actually going to fit into Cloud9. Because I've made the mistake of hiring players that are just a big name and they come over and it's a total bust. We've hired Rush. That was a total bust. Like he basically halfway through the season stopped playing solo queue and stopped caring. It was not because he's a bad guy. He was super homesick. It is a huge culture shock to be here. And you never know when that's going to hit you. I had the same thing happen with Ray. It was super difficult. And so I'm careful. I don't like losing money for without I want to basically really research it and make sure it makes sense. That's a fit for Cloud9, not just as far as a name, but they're gonna buy into what we're doing.
Why do you think that happened with Rush? Because he played a full year in NA beforehand, season 5. Yeah, he played with Team Impulse, and that was obviously cited as a pretty bad environment. Like the owners and everything, it just didn't seem great. There was the Zhao scandal. I know he didn't have the best relationship with Impact at the time. So what do you think changed in that second year to make him homesick and not want to play solo queue? Because he was always a huge solo queue grinder. I mean, even in that season I just referenced, season 5, he had rank 1 in NA, etc. Why do you think that just didn't work out within Cloud9, knowing him?
I think it's I think it's really tough to determine when someone's going to get that culture shock or feel homesick. And I think especially with guys coming from Korea, we really do have a very different culture than they do. And you don't know when that's going to hit. And when it hits, it's quite bad, because I've experienced it twice now with 2 different players. And Impact is the only player that really, I never had those problems during the split. He would be so focused on himself and making sure that he was going to do well. But in between splits, getting Impact to return back from Korea was always difficult. We started some boot camps without Impact because he didn't want to come back. He's like, hey, let me try out for SKT, and if I get the job, can I leave? That's how we got Ray. I was like, sure, but I'm going to have to go hire a backup for you. And then when he came back, he's like, hey, I'm back. I'm like, yeah, here's Ray. And he's like, wait, what the fuck? I'm like, well, you're trying out for SKT. What do I have to have a team. And I remember there was some fallout between us over that decision online, because I told him when he was in Korea, and he was pretty angry about it. And it took him coming back to the United States and us talking about my reasons on why I did it, for he's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'm not mad now. Essentially, I've had 3 Korean players, and all 3 times there is a bit of homesickness that we have to deal with.
That makes sense. One thing that came to mind was that most, from my knowledge, you guys still operate within a team house, right? You don't have an office or anything that the players play from. And it seems like you're one of the only teams that still has this model.
The one throwback. And man,
it's not a secret then, because I know that the reason why the other teams went away from it accurately, I mean, I'm sure you can talk about this when you were in the Team Liquid house, Dom, is generally it's super hard to maintain the atmosphere when you're literally, I always describe it as, if a team goes bad, a team house is like a steel cage death match. It's you can't get away from the guy. He hints a scream, you noise you get off ventral or whatever. Ventral, I'm a fucking boomer. Obviously, TeamSpeak or whatever you guys use nowadays.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
And then you turn to one side and he's still there when you're eating your dinner. It means you can't really get that space. How have you made it work?
I think maybe this is where we tend to have a really we're careful about who we hire on, and that the people fit and mesh well together, both inside and outside the game. The guys they watch different Netflix series together. They're watching anime together. They're playing games like board games together. We have it's a fun atmosphere. Like our coaches and our managers spend a lot of time every week.
You spend time there.
Yeah.
When I went to the Cloud9 house, I've seen Jack playing League, and his players backseating him when he's playing Malzahar, so
yeah, they're giving me tips, trying to make sure I can crack into gold, which hasn't happened yet. God damn it. But no,
who knew that Jack stuck in silver thematically sort of makes a lot of sense. Just saying.
Maybe I mean, after this season, maybe he can get to gold. Who knows?
There you go.
Yeah, thank God for TFT. That's the game for boomers, so I don't need
100%.
No mechanics needed, exactly.
Yeah, and you can forget Valorant. No, I'm not going to do that. It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
But I think we literally spent a lot of time trying to think about fun stuff. Like last weekend, we had a barbecue, and I think it's actually a big advantage right now for us that we do have a house, because the players are able to interact. We're able to safely have barbecues and pool parties and hang out and have fun. Obviously, if the environment goes shitty, that's going to be quite bad. So you have to really monitor it and make sure there's really good communication. Usually problems happen is when people don't speak their mind, and or if they're not being told honest feedback. And I think something we talk about a lot is that being a good friend and being a good teammate does not mean you sugarcoat or you don't bring up the problems. You being someone who actually cares says, you're fucking up, dude. You're not putting in enough time. We need you to do X so we feel confidence in you. Because if you don't say that, that's when the problems happen.
Yeah, I think that was
one thing. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Dom.
Well, the one thing I was going to cite is kind of back to the Team Liquid point is I remember that was the toughest part about being in a team house, is that not everyone has the same amount of work ethic to succeed. Everyone has a different recipe for success.
Mm-hmm.
Some people need to go to the gym to relieve stress. Some people need to just sit there and grind the game 24/7. And that was a huge disconnect we had within our team, was that the Korean players were hey, if you want to be the best, you sacrifice sleep and you play 18 hours a day. You play 18 hours. Yeah. You sleep for 5, you wake up, go eat, and then you play more, and you eat while you're in queue, etc. That was their philosophy on how you become the best players in the world. And for other people on our team, for example, xSpecial, that would actually have negative impacts on his performance. If he tried to sleep less and stuff, he would perform worse in scrim. So he would need time to actually sleep, eat healthy, go to the gym. Quas would need to go to the gym. xSpecial was the type of person that would play other games. So just that issue there, where people perceive the recipe for success as different, can be super difficult if you're living all together, because then you have to go about you have a huge issue every single time that you want to so Piglet goes into solo queue, he looks to the left of him and you see xSpecial just loading up a different game or playing 1 hour of Killing Floor 2 a night, which wouldn't be a big deal in a lot of circumstances, but for us, it was catastrophic. It was oh, well, now Piglet doesn't even want to talk to xSpecial anymore because he thinks that xSpecial just isn't trying to win. So, I mean, that was just an example of how our team house kind of impacted us negatively. I think it might be better if people have computers in their own rooms and you have some degree of privacy. But back when I played, everyone's just in the same gaming room. Everyone's playing together all the time. And I think that was a huge negative impact for us personally. So I just wanted to cite that as, an example of it going negatively from personal experience.
Yeah, I think there isn't any one answer to that stuff. We do have players on our team that play less, Licorice plays a bit less solo queue than the other players. But what he does in that free time, he spends a ton of time 1v1ing against Fudge and really understanding the matchups there. So he's not actually spending less time working on his craft. He's just doing it in a different way. And it was really important, if you were to just look at the stats of if how many solo queue games were being played, players would get upset. But once they understood that he was spending a similar amount of time doing 1v1s against Fudge, it was okay. As far as the playing other games thing, I think, if it becomes a significant, if you're not putting in a similar amount of effort on solo queue, it's going to become a problem. And it's not something we can overlook anymore, because historically we saw the Path of Exile / World of Warcraft really eating into our team, and so we can't do it anymore. And so during the season, like, we're not playing Fortnite. We're focusing on League.
When we had Licorice on Summoning Insight, and I think by now we've had like Sven and Niski, I know a bunch of them talked about this, but Licorice especially, it seemed like it almost came from his philosophy. I was actually very impressed by, he basically has the mindset of someone where they're not trying to win the scrim. They're not even necessarily trying to just win the LCS game. It's like he's playing constantly for the long game of like, how do we become the best? And how do we always make the correct decisions? Which, listen, everyone can mouth those words and say that's what they're doing. Like, I have a great video where everyone says they want to win, but the question is, like, what's the process? Like, if you see that actually how they go ahead about it, the words mean nothing compared to the actions. So it seems like they have a very unique philosophy in your team, because as I was saying to him on the show, like, when you're up like 10-0 and you've beaten everyone in the first round robin, it would be easy to think, you know what, we can slack off against this team, or you know what, we can do what G2 does. Maybe we need a break. Let's all pick troll champions against this bottom team and see if we can humiliate them, you know. But they had a very interesting way of locking in, it seemed like, this particular team.
Yeah, that was like a core philosophy of our team, is that we have to improve every single day. And in NA, it was difficult because of our opponents were often garbage. And so, like, you know, from the scrims, we need to figure out, like, regardless of like who we're playing, we need to fill the gaps on where we're failing. Like, yeah, we won this game, we smashed it, but where do we fuck up? Like, that play, you know, that shouldn't have happened. Yeah, we won it, but there was a lot of weakness here. The next time we do this, we need to make sure we're actually assessing this instead. And so that's been a lot of like our focus is like, you know, the things that we're getting, you know, that we might be getting away with in NA, we're not going to internationally. So let's make sure we can improve as much as we can before we get to international play, so that we don't have to play as much catch up, because generally every Worlds, like the first 3 weeks, we're so behind because our competition is so lacking in North America that we need like 2 or 3 weeks just to try to get on par with the other teams. And if we can go to Worlds like without needing that much time to catch up, we'll be much better positioned to do well.
Were you personally worried?
We just blue-balled all the Cloud9 fans, because not only is there going to be no MSI, but this might be the one NA team ever that actually had the mindset that they could have like surprised everyone.
It fucking kills me. Like, but I love my team. Like, they're still so hungry. Like, they're like, fuck it, we're just gonna transition to smashing summer and crushing it at Worlds. Just hope Worlds happens.
Were you personally worried at all when you saw like the team going for like more unique picks in the last like 3 weeks? Were you ever worried like, hey, maybe we like forgot how to win because the games were obviously less clean? I know that the team is still trying things that make sense. I mean, you played like a lot of like Yasuo, Gragas. You know, played Aurelia top lane, Syndra, AD carry. You guys started like going outside of your comfort zone. Bard ended up being a pick. Was that ever like something that was like scary for you to see as an owner, like, oh my god, it's happening again, we're losing focus? Or were you just confident that it's like, hey, even though we're trying things, we're doing it in a method that makes sense to me, so I'm like confident that they'll still be in form come playoffs?
It's interesting because it was all kind of planned, is that like once we were really set up to make sure we go to playoffs, that we can start trying out other stuff. And so it was something we had literally planned already to do, but that's not the first time we'd planned to do that. We planned to do that in the past, but we never felt confident enough to actually do it. But with this team, we really felt confident to do experimenting and exploring of what we could do. And one of the big feedbacks from, you know, our like a post-split interviews with the players was like, can we get more aggressive about trying new shit earlier? Like they love it. They love learning and trying and putting themselves in uncomfortable situations and learning to be comfortable with that uncomfortable situation, and they want to do it sooner. So you might see more wild shit faster in summer than you did in spring.
Makes sense. Are you worried personally about, you know, the fact that there's no championship points or anything like that you don't actually get anything out of winning spring, especially with no MSI? Like, is that kind of like disheartening to you?
Maybe I'm just like the random, like, and I think I am when I talk to a lot of the owners, but I liked the move. I feel like MSI is a super prestigious event, and on its own right, as a pro player, you should be very excited about to try to go to this event. It's insanity. Like, my counter have pride in what you do. And the thing is like my Counter-Strike teams, there's dozens of international events, and every single one they fight their ass off to go and show their shit and show that they're good. And to me it's mind-boggling when players like, this doesn't matter, I don't want to go to MSI, it's not enough for me. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, literally, if a player said that on my team, they would be the next trade. Just get the fuck out, I don't even want you.
Really interesting. Yeah. I've always been on the opposite side. I've been on the side where I just don't think MSI is like that important in general, just because you see teams go and you see teams like not be able to replicate their strength like in the next tournament. I think that it's a good experience to have for a team. I see the like, if I was on a team, I would want to go to MSI. But as somebody who like analyzes it, like, I don't care who the fuck wins MSI. It's like, oh, you won MSI, and Team Liquid got second in MSI. Okay, well, let's see if you get out of fucking groups. Like that's just my mentality.
The thing is, it's like MSI on its own is one of the biggest esports events, period, through all the games. And so it's super prestigious. It's crazy. And I think like your viewpoint is because you're a league focused player, but like, because I spend so much time with other games and other mentalities, that every international event matters, and they want to prove themselves. That's how I feel. Like, for me, MSI is huge. And I was just blown away that other owners and players didn't feel the same way. And I don't give a fuck about championship points. Like, how much have they actually mattered to Cloud9 historically?
Yeah, exactly.
To win the gauntlet. And I think last year is the only time we actually ever qualified on points. But points don't matter to me at all. And I want to send the 3 best teams at the moment of summer to go compete internationally. I don't want another like 100 Thieves garbage team going there and just getting shit on. I don't want another CLG, which is a fucking joke out there. No, I want the 3 best teams in NA to go out and see what they can do.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. I mean, it actually gives some importance back to I assume that like the way that they're going to do it is the 3rd place match actually matters. Like the team that qualifies, that's just going to be
the top 32 teams out of playoffs, and now the 3rd place match actually matters for 4 teams.
Yeah, because I remember when I was in 2015, my team won the 3rd place match and we lost to Cloud9 in the gauntlet, and it's like you play that 3rd place match, and
how much did that fucking suck for you? I mean, that was fucking awful.
Yeah,
like, great for me, but it was awful.
Yeah, no, it was. I remember just you coming over. You felt bad at like how devastated our team was, even though like your team won. I remember you coming into like our area or whatever, and just like trying to console some of the players, because it's so crushing, like going through that whole experience. And that was also the first time that the 3rd place match didn't determine who went to Worlds in previous seasons.
I think I talked with you outside the front doors LCS.
Yep, I remember that.
You were gutted, and I felt super bad because and I just remember like, how the fuck? Yeah, I think he said, how the fuck does High win all the fucking time? Like, like he doesn't even know what he's doing in jungle, and he still wins. What the fuck?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it just shows like, I think that was like a very big eye-opening experience to me, where it was like, how much is he contributing? Because if you remember like the actual games, like I'm ahead of High every single game in terms of like pure jungle stats. Like,
he wasn't even playing the right champions. He's playing like Shyvana and stuff.
In the gauntlet, like he didn't try that shit versus me. He played real champions versus me.
Right, okay.
So like in the games that I was playing, like he's playing Elise, Echo, things like that. But for me, it was just so surprising. I'm like, he must be just doing so much for his team, because the team is functioning together so well. And even though I have leads in all these games and like I'm individually ahead, it's like there's always some bad decision. I think that his ability to predict like what his teammates were going to do and like call off their ideas beforehand was so much like greater than anyone else at the time. And that's why I felt like that team just functioned so well. Because if you remember the team, it was in shambles. Like you were on the verge of relegation until High came back, and then High comes back into the team, doesn't even play the role, like replacing Meteos, who was one of the best NA junglers of all time, if not the best NA jungler of all time at that point, replaces Meteos, and suddenly the team is just like going to Worlds.
Yeah, he's a rare, like the type of shot caller he was like you don't really see anymore. And I mean it was an amazing blessing and also a terrible curse, because like our team was so tied to having a voice like that. Like trying to improve the team without him was super difficult. But because he definitely made the players better than they were on their own.
You can't live and die if you have a player like that, right? The upside is great, but if you don't have him, you've got nothing at that point.
It was painful, very painful to move away from that.
One thing that I just thought of there when we were talking about High was the fact that you guys brought Smoothie in 2016. And I think that was, he was the one that replaced High. High was playing support at the time. And that was the first iteration that didn't have High on the roster, if I'm If I'm not correct, I think it was.
Yes, you're right. It was
Impact, Meteos. Jensen.
It was Smoothie and BunnyFuFuu. There you go. They were like split in time initially, if you remember.
And that's right. Also, when we brought on Reapered and Impact, Meteos came back. It was fucking wild.
By the way, that's one of those what ifs that no one ever talks about. Dude, BunnyFuFuu, when he used to be on the Curse team, looked like a mad sick rot. Like,
that was my boy.
He was with the team at the time. Yeah, he looked like he had a lot of talent. Like, and so
I picked him up out of solo queue.
What happened to this guy? Like, why did he just kind of like just go and become a streamer? Because I feel like he's someone who could have beaten someone else. Yes,
from my perspective, I think the thing that hurt him the most was that he didn't end up being on our roster for Summer Split. Like the fact that he came into the team, like our team was in shambles, you know. I mean, I guess we were like 6th place at the time, but we were like not a good team at all. We were barely able to beat the bottom tier teams. We lose to Cloud9 every single time that we played them, etc. And he came into the team and, you know, he immediately had good support mechanics. And that was something that we lacked. And at the time I was a very heavy ganking jungler, and it opened up our team with the ability to gank bot because I could trust this guy to play situations properly, hit CC, etc. And I would get a lot of kills bot lane. And we had a great synergy. And the thing that was also insane was his attitude at the time was so like hungry for improvement, and he was just the type of person that was like, oh, I played this in solo queue, like it was so sick, like if you play Thresh and this jungler right here, we can gank from this angle. Like he was trying to like innovate and just take support to like a whole nother level.
That's like a dream if you're a jungler and you hear that.
Yeah, exactly. and if you go back and watch those games from spring, I mean, maybe I'll watch it on stream sometime with my chat, like there was so many there was so many times where like we would just get these ridiculous kills like in LCS where he's just every single time he's playing Thresh, flash flay, lantern back, I'm just ganking through lane, just kills on kills on kills. And he performed so well throughout that season. And for him to not retain his spot, like the fact that he got benched for Xpecial, and this is a player that we didn't think was very, like, as individual players, we didn't have like a huge amount of respect for Xpecial at the time. We thought he was like good, you know, maybe he was like a shot caller. He had experience of like, you know, winning championships within TSM. So maybe that was something that he could give us in terms of that. But in terms of direct mechanics, we believe that BunnyFuFuu was such a great player. So I think that just really killed him, that it's like he got into LCS, he performed well in LCS, he has all these clips, all this hype, and like more than that, this was like just such a great moment for him to just go from being in solo queue to like coming to our team house. His mom would drive him up on the weekends because he was still going to high school at the time. His mom would drive him up on weekends. He'd be in the team house for a week. This is like his first time away from home, and we were all just like, you know, friends. And he was just kind of like, he was like our little brother at the time. That's kind of how we like treated him, because like, you know, we'd go and eat Chick-fil-A and he'd just be like, you know, he'd have like sauce all over his face and everything. It's like, come on, man, clean up. Like, let's just like what's wrong with you, dude? Like, you're so good in the game, but your life skills just aren't there, etc. And then like he felt like he was such an ingrained part of just like our culture. So when he just wasn't able to play LCS anymore, I think that really like killed his motivation. He played like that split of Academy, eventually requalified with Gravity, but Gravity didn't have the same type of team environment. You know, Gravity was kind of just okay being there. They weren't really trying to be champions, or I mean, everyone says they're trying to be champions, but they weren't putting in the correct effort to become champions. And I think that just like that period where he came in the super hot support, like he's trying to win it all, and then having to like rebuild once you've had that high, I think that really killed his momentum in terms of like trying to be the best NA support, etc.
Man, this brings back a ton of memories. Like when you think about it, like I remember when him and Smoothie were trying out for the spot. Like both, like mechanically, they were pretty much on par. They're both quite good. What we you know, think about us, like at the time, we were just moving away from high, and we were used to having a very like good shot caller, strong voice, and we were trying to kind of replace that with, and that wasn't really what Bunny brought to the table, but Smoothie was very vocal. We were hoping that he could like kind of fill that void that we thought we needed at the time. And even that really wasn't working out with Smoothie either. So basically Smoothie kind of started taking the pole position there, but we still weren't seeing the shot calling or the atmosphere like during the games that we wanted. And we actually tried out Zazel for some scrims. He was, I think he was like 16 or 17 at the time. This is back when he was like on our challenger team with Licorice, 13. And he flew out. He was such a baby. He was so little, and really nice kid. And we put him into the game. We put him into the game. Unfortunately, Reapered was working on his like P1 visa. He was in Canada at the time, I basically told him like, hey, like just try to listen in, just try to, add to the value, but don't try to lead the team right now because these guys, like, you're young. If you try to start calling shots, they're going to look at you sideways and say, shut up, kid. Well, he started trying to lead, which because he's a really smart guy. He's got something to say. And his teammates, one teammate just completely shit on him, like real bad. To the point where like I gotta send this kid home right now because it felt wrong seeing a 16-year-old get just manhandled in the scrim. So I like bought him a first class ticket back home. I felt super bad. But it was essentially at the time we were still looking for the shot calling person that we needed. And it just kind of reminds me with Bunny, like really good guy. He had a really good stream. His YouTube was like, I'm like, I think you have something here that you should really focus on that since you're not getting as much playtime. And as we can see, his YouTube is completely cut off.
A perfect fit.
Yeah.
Highlighters all over the place.
Yeah, it's actually nuts. I think he's got channels and and that's just here in North America. He's got channels like exactly. He's crushing it. Multiple houses in Vegas and like live-in chefs. The guy is he's pimping it. It's pretty crazy.
I'll spin it the other way around. Well done. Yeah, why would you keep calling me an LCS player?
It's really cool.
I think for me, like the only reason that it makes me sad is like I believe that he could have been like one of like the true NA talent supports.
Sure.
Like, I thought he would be like a useful person to have like going to like Worlds and stuff like that. So like for me, it's like I see what could have been, and I just saw like his base level. His base skills were so high coming into the league that I would have just loved to see like what he could have truly done if like, if he was harnessed from that season 4 time. So.
Sure. Right. To pivot a little bit, there is a topic. Listen, we keep it real on this show. So I want to ask you about like, there was like a minor scandal. I just say a scandal because anytime anything's like secret that people find out that they don't know, they immediately just read into it, everything they want. Right. There was this thing during the off season, I believe, was when it came out that emerged that players who were pro players for Cloud9 had been given equity within the company, and that some of them, in fact, were the players who were former players at this point in time. Like Jensen, for example, is on Team Liquid and he has equity in Cloud9. Now, can you give us any insight into like why give them equity? Like, what's the thinking behind that? And then we can get into the weeds depending on where we go on it.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you asked. It's a good question. There's a lot there. I think the why equity issue was that. If you looked at Cloud9's trajectory as a company, we were growing in our valuation basically at a rocket ship rate, and I think it was hard for the players to hear like Cloud9's now valued at 30 million, now 100 million, now 300 million, and they're thinking like Cloud9's making a ton of money and we're not really, but we're a big part of the success and we're not actually getting any part of that. And so I wanted to figure out a way for the players for them to actually be able to take part of that upside. And but there were some complications in that there was a lot of concern that if a player ever left Cloud9 to go to another team, they obviously can't own Cloud9 because there'd be a massive conflict of interest because like, oh, hey, like, if Cloud9 actually wins this game, maybe the valuation of Cloud9 goes up. And so I actually make more money personally if Cloud9 wins. Well, that's a bro problem. That can never exist. And so we spent a lot of time actually talking with the LCS on like, how can we make this work? How could the contract be set up to make sure that no player from Cloud9 ever leaves with equity to go to another team and still has that equity? And we came to an understanding of what contract would actually the way it would work, and that was okay. It was we felt like it actually solved all those conflict of interest issues. Where we screwed up is that we didn't actually document with Riot that, hey, this is 100% okay. We had emails going back and forth saying, hey, what you set up works. We do have that, but there was no like, you are now approved to do this, and that was our screw up. That's where we fucked up. So we felt like, okay, cool. The conflict of interest is now solved. If a player ever leaves Cloud9 and if we ever trade him, like against his wishes, we pay him out on that equity. But if the player ever says, I want to get the fuck out of here and I don't want to be here anymore, I am okay with walking away from the equity, knowing that I can never have Cloud9 equity on another team, that I'm going to forfeit it. That was the way that the agreement was set up. Okay. And so, and I, at the time when the scandal was basically coming out, I had a bigger scandal in my hands. I was dealing with Sneaky, being losing his spot and Zeyzal being traded and Svenskeren. So I had multiple pitchforks being stuck into me. I had calls for my head. And to be honest, I just didn't want to actually deal with it. Like I was like, I've got enough other fires here right now. I just need to focus on making sure my team is good. And so when I saw a lot of the mischaracterizations of what actually happened, I didn't actually dive into it because it didn't really matter what I said. I was wrong. And I knew that unless I actually win LCS, everyone's going to say I'm a fool. So, I'm just going to shut up and put my money where my mouth is and go crush it. And then I can talk about it. So I did that. So now I'm ready to talk about it. So at no point in time did, when, and there's also things like with equity, there's things called vesting schedules.
Yes.
Almost every player that left Cloud9 to be on another team never actually vested any equity.
Yes,
So they never actually even had it.
Yeah, exactly.
The only player that did earn some was Dennis, and according to our agreement, like he would have been walking away from it because he wanted to go, but we ended up paying him out on anyways. And then people are going to say, well, then why did you have to pay all these penalties to the player? Well, we didn't do things right according to the right rule set. And so the penalty was we ended up paying those players even on stock they didn't actually invest. So that sucked and that was expensive, but it's okay. I fucked up. And so it's okay.
Yeah, two quick things. One, in case people just don't know the term, vesting basically means you don't start at the end amount of stock that you're going to have. And so one of the ways it's typically used in companies, like for example, in a startup, is you don't want the guy to be part of the company. And then after 1 year, just leave and be like, well, I've got all my stock, so fuck you guys. But try and make the company really good though without me. What you do is it's a way to lock people in. Like that way, maybe you get like 1% in the first year, then it goes to 2% in the second year, then 3%. So it incentivizes someone to stay and to be all in on the project because they're trying to build something that when they either go along with it, when they get to that 5% or whatever it might be, it's going to be worth a lot more, hopefully, because they did a great job in there. So one, is that like generally a strategy you would like to apply? I mean, I can certainly see value in it beyond. Listen, one of the problems I think with the current climate and the market within League of Legends is you do have a scenario where the stupidest part about the Huni contract of Dignitas is at the end of the year or the end of his contract, he could have just said, well, thanks for all the money. It's been great. I'm just going to go to the next contract now. It's like, wait, what? So all we got for that money was just the splits he played, which if you know about how the economics of League of Legends work right now, it's not really worth $2 million to get that. So do you like it as an idea to kind of get people to buy into the concept of Cloud9 beyond just playing in your team now?
No, that's exactly the idea is that like, hey, like when you get your sponsor, like you have to go do this sponsor for X partner. I want you to actually care about making sure that partner is happy because I'm going to make a lot of money when Cloud9 is worth like triple this amount in like 3 or 4 years. So I wanted them to be really tied to the success of Cloud9 and us to be tied to them. So we're mutually tied to each other's success. That was the whole point. And like with the change to the rules, like as my players hit their 3rd year, they have expressed they want equity. So there were players like Blabber and Licorice that they were on a vesting schedule. I had to basically buy them out of the equity, but they told me straight up, like when I hit my 3-year mark, I want that equity back. So I will be giving it back to them again the next contract, which is really crazy to think. Like Licorice is on his 3rd year. Blabber is on his 3rd year. So they will be getting equity for 12.
No wonder that Blabber guy wanted to stay and build stuff, All right, he's got a smart head on his shoulders. He's not as crazy as he is in game, I see, with his money.
He's actually quite smart. It's actually crazy.
Oh, by the way, just so people don't get lost, what Jack was also intimating there when he was saying how you had to carefully construct the contract depending on if the player just said, I'm going to leave, and so I just leave the equity behind, or if Jack's the one who says, you're out of here, pack your bags. Because the problem is, you can imagine quite obviously, if instead the player just lost his equity no matter what, whether he was traded or whether he left voluntarily, it would mean that, okay, we're going to assume Jack wouldn't do this, but someone shady could just say, right, actually, you know what? We're going to do big things next year. You're not going to be part of it, or fuck you, we're just going to nick the equity from you. So you obviously don't want that to happen as well. You need to make it clear that like there's rules set in place beforehand so that that's never even a consideration, because that's another conflict of interest potentially.
It'd be super unfair, right?
Makes sense.
What do you think is a general approach, though? Because I've heard basically, I mean, obviously everyone knows that Bjergsen did it now in TSM and he's got some equity and that's part of why he signed the big deal, etc. But we haven't heard that many stories about other players doing it. And basically, it's interesting because on the one hand, if I was an owner personally, I don't know if I would want to give much equity away because essentially I want to gamble on myself and that if my org's the biggest org in the world in 20 years, I want to have loads of equity, mate, so I get loads of the $1 billion. But I've heard from other owners that are friends of mine that it's a really, really clever, cost-effective way to make someone's contract a little bit juicier if you get them to believe that the equity is going to be worth something. Because essentially, at the moment, you're not giving them money. Like, you get to keep your money, but you get to give them a little bit of something that one day is worth. So they say personally at the moment, they'd rather actually trade cash for equity initially. So where are things at and where's your perspective on it?
That's a really good question. I think it's really important to talk about because the thing is, it's not equity. It's not all created equal. And what I mean by that is that if you take equity as a player in a team that is a company that's like a sub company of a larger company, the equity in that small sub is actually it's garbage. It's not worth anything. With Cloud9, if I'm giving you equity into greater Cloud9, which owns Overwatch teams and everything else, and Cloud9 sells, then that equity is actually super valuable. And the investors in Cloud9, like when I told them I want to give these players equity, they were pissed. They're like, no, I don't want to give that up. I'm investing in this with the expectation of being 10x its value. That's way too valuable. Why would you do that? And the reason I would want to do it was because I want them super bought into the company. I want them to be supportive of our partners. If they make us bigger, they should participate. So I had to actually fight for it. So when the ruling came out from Riot, the owners were like, this is great. Get all our equity back. It's like, because we know it's going to be worth a lot more. But I really believe in the people that make Cloud9 viable. They should participate, and I want them to participate. And like that's how I am compensated is through equity, And so and the exact same type of equity, like the type of equity that my players have is the exact same type that I have. So it's not like I'm selling them some garbage. If I fail, then they fail. If I win, then they win. And that's been the whole point of it.
Yeah, in case people don't know, by the way, I'll just give everyone the complete black pill on traditional sports here. So first of all, if anyone knows anything about the economics of like the NFL, of the NBA, it doesn't matter how much they pay those players because of the way the salary cap works. Like LeBron James probably gets paid 1/10 of what he actually would get on like a free market because of what he would bring to that team and what like the value is. So as a result, by the way, when those owners build a statue to a player that won them like 3 championships and made their actual org worth like $1 billion, that's actually almost like a tiny gesture. They're not doing something amazing for that player in that scenario because he was like if you have Michael Jordan, like the difference between the Chicago Bulls with and without him is enormous. So giving him a statue is actually nothing in that world. Like he'd rather have the equity, mate. If he could have had some money going out the door and he could have owned part of the Chicago Bulls, he'd have taken that in a heartbeat. So it's one of those areas where actually in esports, we could potentially, if it's structured right, it's going to be very tricky, as you can tell by the way this conversation's being navigated. If we can structure it right, I think it's really cool because that's one of the things in the early days of esports I do think is what. I'll give you a very quick example. If anyone knows CSGO, probably the most famous CSGO player of all time is the player Forrest from Sweden, right? And if you think of Forrest, right, in the modern day, the first thing you think is Nip. He plays for Ninjas in Pajamas, of course. He played for them for years, right? What you won't realize is in CS 1.6, he famously was in Fnatic. He was in Fnatic for 5 years. And when he joined Fnatic, they were literally a bedroom organization that was nothing. He was basically the first great player on that team. Then, when he left, they were already one of the biggest orgs in the world. Now, listen, it wasn't at the point where people had got billions of dollars. The team was probably worth like 100,000 or something ridiculous. Well, obviously not that low, maybe 500,000, let's say. But the problem, what I'm getting to is, without Forrest, they don't get to that point. But Forrest himself will never see a dime from that. He'll never get any extra value out of that. Everything he built there was just the matches he won in the server. So I like the idea that we can actually potentially do a better job than sports has in that regard. Like these players aren't just basically mercenaries playing for the highest possible amount, because I'll tell you right now, as sad as it is, it doesn't matter how much you get paid as just your salary. You'll never be a rich man, and it's very unlikely you'll actually have that money in years in the future of your life, because you'll spend it all, you'll waste it all, and you'll stop making the income. That's the big problem. So I hope in the future in esports, maybe we could make these legendary players also, they can become super baller businessmen afterwards, and they can have stakes in what they help build.
I guess one thing that kind of leads into is like the idea of like, do you think that esports is still growing to that like next level, like, or do you think that it's kind of capped here? I mean, there's been talks of similar to the League of Legends player salary like bubble bursting. Like, do you think that there's like a chance that, you know, esports has hit its peak, or do you think that like there's still chances to like, you know, really make some money when it comes to like having equity in some of these teams?
We're still just starting, and yeah, we're having like some financial issues right now, but that's really outside of esports, like the entire market is. But the thing is, like, just look at what's going on with this whole COVID issue. Like, it's an incredible opportunity for esports to actually become like one of the premier competitive viewed sports, because
I always say it's like the accelerator pad in Mario Kart. Like this, we could just skip 5 years.
Exactly. It's an insane opportunity, because like NBA is probably going to be canceled. NFL is going to be canceled. Like all these leagues are not going to run, but we're still running. So, you know, all of these networks that have all these huge like advertising deals, you think they want to give that up? Hell no, they don't want to. So they're going to be looking and fighting for the esports content that we're providing. And so this could accelerate us. And I don't think we've come even close to where we're going. So, yeah, I mean, that's the silver lining on the shitty stuff that we're dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds good. I mean, I've been thinking about like the ESPN contract and how much of that was fueled by the COVID thing, like where like ESPN is, I mean, I know that there was some contract in place already, but the fact that ESPN was now actually ESPN2 is now actually showing League of Legends, LCS, etc. Like I was wondering if that was actually because of COVID-19 or if that was just like the natural progression of things.
I think it absolutely accelerated it. I think the conversation's been going on for years, but now like they actually had holes in content to fill. And it's not going to get better through this year. It's going to get worse. So for that, better for us.
Put it this way, Dom. When we did Flashpoint, which I've been totally open from day one, we thus far in the Flashpoint project, we don't have the best CS teams in the world. Like we actually had 0 top 10 teams. Just because Flashpoint was going on as a tournament and could be broadcast, we were getting people who were like coming and like inquiring about like the availability of broadcast rights, who were enormous people. Like this really showed me actually what Jack's saying here, like really early on, like this could actually be as crazy as it sounds, like as bad as it is for the other areas of the world, for esports, yeah, it's killed the LAN scene, but it could actually mean that when the LANs come back, we're like 5 years ahead of the whole industry.
Right. Mm-hmm. The business is that this, like, I mean, this is I'm not trying to say like, that we're taking advantage of a bad situation, but the reality is this is a big opportunity for businesses that figure out how to work out digitally. It's a chance for them, if they've been backseat in business for years, it's a chance for them to become like the future leaders, and we should definitely take it.
One thing I thought would be a cool thing we could pivot onto towards the end of the episode is, since Dom is obviously a professional streamer and obviously gets loads of views, that's why I'm on this channel right now. I don't fucking work for free, you know how it is. So obviously, and you know that was someone inside, mate. Listen, I don't do that for just for the love of the game. Put it out. Are you sure? So here's the question. I thought we could have an interesting conversation with the two of you, in as much as one of the areas that Cloud9 was obviously very successful, especially a few years back, was building up streaming figures and getting amazing deals and using your sponsorship abilities to get those people sick deals and basically take them from the days when you would have to sort of play as a pro a bit to have the numbers, people who want to watch you, but then also you want to stream enough to make the money from the fame, etc. How is the streaming market now for organizations specifically? Like, is Cloud9 still trying to be in the business of having huge streamers? Are you trying to be a streamer factory like FaZe at the same time? So, for example, a bit of a general thought, but also like with someone like Dom, like, is there a world of, like, could you afford Dom if you wanted Dom to be on your streaming network and you wanted him to represent you?
I don't know, we should talk about that, but
I'm interested to know. I don't know.
But like, I think that things like SI and this show and the others are really filling a hole right now, because in the past, a lot of our top pros did spend a ton of time streaming, but they just don't have that type of time anymore. And so I've really loved watching the co-streaming content that's been coming out. And so there's different options to watch the same game we all love, but in a different way. And I think like shows like, Summoning Insight and the show and others, they definitely have a big spot to grow. Cloud9 specifically, we've really been focused like on esports, as like just the esports pro teams, like specifically, or that each team has kind of done their own thing. Like TSM is focused on like their guide website, and Team Liquid is kind of like a spoke for Axiomatic, and Golden Guardians is like they're the eSports team for the Warriors, but they're not like, they're a small little piece of what's going on. But teams like G2 and Cloud9, eSports is all we do, and we're the parent companies and we're running the show. So we're different. And for the most part, I've really just focused on making the best pro teams. But like when I saw the opportunity to work with some of the insights, I thought it was a really cool way for us to kind of fill this streamer hole.
Yeah, I think that it really comes down to like how the companies orient themselves, because a lot of companies, like the reason why they would go for streamers is because they had specific Twitch contracts, which required a certain amount of viewer hours to be done. And streamers would fulfill a certain amount of those. But now I think it's harder for companies to afford that, because Twitch is now signing people directly. So now there's a huge amount of money coming into the scene from other streaming platforms. You have Facebook, you have Mixer, you have Caffeine to some degree, you have YouTube Gaming, and then there's another one that's coming out that's like NDA I can't talk about, but there's another big streaming platform that's going to make push for streamers. And it doesn't seem worth it for these teams to sign players anymore, because essentially all you're getting is the branding, and the amount of money that you would have to spend to get these streamers is just so unreasonable compared to like. So
what you're saying is they can't afford you, Dom. Cloud9 can't afford Dom.
We could, but it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, they could. Yeah, exactly. Pretty much. Pretty much, or it would be the type of thing where they would have to like. I'm not sure how Cloud9 is built if they have a streaming contract with Twitch directly, and like if they would be comfortable like just representing like certain aspects of my stream, but not like running the whole thing.
Yeah, I think how we carve up like partnerships would have to play into it, because a lot of our partners, they expect to own all of Cloud9 stuff, so it would basically have to be a different property for it to make sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to change a lot in the next couple of years, because this is like really where the big years are for streamers coming up, with all these new companies reaching out. This is where streamers can really make their money, and I think that after a while, these contracts aren't going to go on forever. I don't think that, in 5 years, you're still going to be seeing like these massive deals. Like, I don't think Mixer is going to be giving $40 million contracts out and everything in the future. So I think that these are the years which are really like streamer favored. And then it's going to shift back like 3-4 years down the road. That's at least my perception of it as a streamer.
Yeah. I've tried to focus on like, my core business is making and developing esports teams and players, and so that's why I've kind of shied away from streamers recently. Is like I want to make sure I do what I do well and not get because it gets very complicated with the streamer agreements. And so if we were to venture back into it, it'd have to be like a separate property, so it doesn't get tied down with my current partners.
When you say that you're mainly focused on the esports side and stuff, that's one thing that a lot of people probably aren't aware of, right? Is that it's not just Jack who does everything now and decides everything. He's got another guy who's one of the big investors in Cloud9 called Dan Fiden, who's also involved. And in fact, he's involved with the Flashpoint project with me. And over on the CS side, I've heard he's like more CS and you're more on like the league side. Is that accurate?
Yeah, he's he definitely, like we split up the work, and he's really focused like on tournament like operations, and so Flashpoint was 100% him, and he definitely does take more interest in our Counter-Strike team. He's been way more active in Overwatch than I have been, and so there's some of like we basically kind of we split out the work, so we don't actually both end up spending time on the same project, because it's not really it's redundant. But yeah, he's a big part of who we are.
Don't worry, I always tell people, just because I like it now, I'm friendly with them, I like to fuck with them a bit because it's just my personality. I always say it on stream at every opportunity, stop blaming Jack for the CSGO team of Cloud9. That's all Dan Fiden. Yeah, but you all eventually.
I wish I could blame everything on him on that one. No, but I mean, thankfully, I mean, that was the Counter-Strike team is, I mean, I'm not sure if your audience really cares, but that was a big gamble as well. And it's like definitely a development move, which is something we've taken a lot of pride in, and they're doing well now, but they have their moments when they're not, and so it'll be interesting to see how that develops.
A quick thing, that team basically just plays into the philosophy, because you haven't really talked about it here, but your philosophy is kind of like scouting players, right? It's not just about buying the big names. Like, listen, it's not that anyone can buy the big names. You have to do a good job in business and have the money, and then you have to convince them. Sure, there's skills to that, but if you look at any sport, a lot of the skill is in scouting. Like that's where if you put your money and you have a good staff, obviously it pays dividends because you get the guy for next to nothing and then he becomes good. And then maybe you even sell him, which basically just describes what Cloud9 did for the last 5 years. So is that the new philosophy in Cloud9?
We feel we're at our best when we're taking players that need development and turning them into top end pros and winning with those players. And you also get, you get players when they're at their hungriest in their career, when they need to prove something. And so we really believe in that fire being a big part of what we do.
What were you going to say, Dom?
I was just going to ask for Jack's opinion on like Valorant, like the potential pro scene and obviously your opinion too, and like how that's going to tie into CS. Do you think that it's going to like cannibalize a lot of the CS market, or do you think that like both of them can exist by themselves? Like how's Cloud9's interpretation? Are you signing a Valorant team? Like what do you think about this new game coming out and just the potential esports push?
I'm super excited by the game because Riot builds the best esports ecosystems in a controlled fashion. So I'm really excited about seeing what they're going to build. I believe in the game. I don't think it's replacing Counter-Strike at all. They're different, and I think that Counter-Strike is the gold standard on viewership experience. And so and I don't and even Valorant doesn't hold a candle to it at this point because the game is just so clean. But there's a lot of space. I think probably they're for the most part actually eating up Overwatch fans at this point. Yeah. And
wait, what game is that?
But Overwatch.
Oh, never heard of it. I'm just kidding.
But there's room for all three games, and because they're different, and so and I'm super excited because I know how much Riot cares about esports that they're going to build a really good ecosystem. Okay.
Yeah, the joke there, Dom, should have been like, people still play Overwatch? What, that came from like 2016 or whatever? Oh, that's cool. Yeah,
I wanted to be a little bit more subtle with it, we gotta,
No, I would say my take on Valorant is, like, first of all, I think it plays a very important role as like a fun, casual game. I think you can have amazing success doing that. Like, it seems to have actually, in a very clever, and I don't actually think that cynical manner, taken elements of what people liked about Counter-Strike as a casual fan, but not the most hardcore player, what they liked about Overwatch, what they liked about League. Because the good thing about League especially, in my opinion, the real reason League has succeeded and continued to succeed is, as much as you can be really skilled and certain parts are really hard, the barrier to entry is very low. Like, anyone can just go and start playing a normals game or super low, like iron level, and just play like Janna and just sit in the lane. And you might actually just trip over and win a game. Like, go and try do that in Counter-Strike. You will get your asshole torn up by everyone in the server. You won't know any angles. You won't know how to hold the spot. You'll just get completely wrecked. It'd be the equivalent of like going into an NFL scrimmage when you've never played American football. You wouldn't even know what you're doing. So to me, that's the interesting part, though, is that's why to me Counter-Strike retains its like amazing esports following, because it's so hardcore. If you like it, there's not really any other game in town. Like, it's just Counter-Strike and it's that. Like, if anything, you're just waiting for, is Counter-Strike 2 coming out? That's the only real option at this point. So it can definitely coexist. And I kind of agree. I think it will maybe cannibalize or challenge Overwatch for that sector of the market. But
yeah,
I have my
Fortnite as well.
Fortnite as well, yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. But my concerns are, like, I'm not quite sure on the esports side what's going to happen here and where it's going to go, because the problem is, as the more fun you make something and the more fun you make it in a casual sense, it can then be a bit harder to make it an esports product and viable in that sense. Like, all I'll say is this, Dom, the numbers on Counter-Strike for overall playing numbers have gone up and up and up and up and up. They just keep going up.
Yeah, it's like
the game came out 8 years ago. Like, CSGO, this version of the game came out 8 years ago. So can you imagine anyone playing any of the games aside from League? It's very rare that games have that longevity. So I don't think anything can kill a game like that. It has to almost kill itself or just die out itself, and then organically it will just be replaced when there's a vacuum of nobody in. Like, I don't think any game comes along and then everyone who plays Counter-Strike for 8 years, the same maps, the same positions, watching the same players, they don't just then go, you know what the hell? That gun, there's a new gun in that game. I think I'll just throw this entire thing out. But no, like people who are into Counter-Strike are sort of married to it a little bit.
Yeah, well, I guess I was kind of just wondering, do you, because we saw Sinatra, who's the best Overwatch player of all time, I guess in people's minds. I don't watch Overwatch, so I don't know, but I think that's like the narrative.
He's the best player in the world.
Okay, so he's the best player in the world. He transferred from Overwatch to Valorant. Do you think that there's like a chance that some of the other like CS pros, like that are potentially top CS pros, would go to another game like Valorant?
I would just say this: look at the players already from CS:GO who are moving over. They're literally people who either never made it. In fact, Jack has one. He has tens. He had a guy. He was trying to work. He was trying to be the next Blabber, basically. He was trying to be the Blabber of CS:GO. He wanted to work this guy who had good mechanics into a CS:GO team, which was one of the ones that was one of the more troubled teams. It didn't work out. So when he had the reset and he got an entirely brand new team, why not try this guy in Valorant? He basically never had his CS career yet. He's not throwing anything away. So that makes sense. There's a lot of people also who played many years, but they've gone down or they aren't at the top level. So it's worth it for them to give it a chance. I haven't heard of a single like top 30 team player, top 20 team player who at the moment plans to move. Because the thing is, you've built so much in Counter-Strike. One of the things that's brilliant about Counter-Strike, by the way, contrasted to League, you should know this as a jungler, they can just change the entire game on your ass, and next year all of a sudden, like the things you were the best at are done. Like if you were the best at aiming with an AK in Counter-Strike, you can play forever, mate. You can just basically play until you stop caring or that everyone overtakes you. So as a result, the people who've put in like 3-4 years and now they're like, 13th best team in the world, they're committed to trying to be the 5th best team in the world next year. No one's bailing for a game that doesn't yet have tournaments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really unique to Counter-Strike, that the game doesn't change that much. So like the hours that you put in over a decade are still valuable. It's really unique in eSports.
It's kind of a unicorn in that sense, yeah.
Yeah, and so you're not going to see like the tier 1 players moving, I don't think. But I think you will see a lot of tier 2 players move. There's a lot of players that like they're on the periphery of greatness, and there's obviously in any game that's had as much history as Counter-Strike, there's a lot of politics that you have to play to get into the tier 1 teams.
Yes.
So there are still like really good players that just aren't getting their shot in Counter-Strike. Or just haven't put enough time yet in to get their shot, that are probably going to jump. I mean, we're seeing like Swole Patrol, like they're now ranked on HLTV, like top 30. They don't have an org supporting them. And it's really hard to, even if they love, like I think Freakazoid put out, it's like, someone help us because we don't want to go join Valorant. But the thing is they got bills to pay. And if someone's offering them like $5,000 a month to come play a different game, like how long are they going to hold out? Like, because, so we're going to see more tier 2 teams and tier 2 players move over if there aren't opportunities in Counter-Strike.
And by the way, that's also another area where the whole lockdown thing and the impact on the economy is actually, that's where it manifests negatively in esports. Good luck if you're someone who doesn't have an org right now. Nobody wants to add teams. Like you might want to trade up for a team. You might decide to invest in that way, but nobody's like saying like, I don't have a Counter-Strike division. Can we just spend loads of the money that we're already having a restricted budget on? Like people are slashing budgets, people are slashing salaries.
We just cut our Dota team, and they started actually getting results that beat EG. They were starting to do some good stuff. But the thing is, that team, I made that team because I wanted to have a team in Los Angeles that I could work with and develop like personally. I'm sitting in their house. They're not here, unfortunately. But the thing is when all this rolled out, like I couldn't get visas for these players anymore. Like the earliest possible, if we're lucky, is like 6 months. And when they don't have a visa, I can't get them healthcare here in the United States. It's literally impossible for me to actually do the Dota project like I wanted to. So we had to step away. And I'm not the only team that's having those issues. We all are, all for the North American teams. And so it definitely makes it harder for the unsigned players to get work. And so if it takes them joining Valorant, again, they may not be their top pick. They're going to do it if they get a paycheck.
Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, just for people who aren't familiar with Counter-Strike, another thing that makes Counter-Strike very unique because of the fact the game doesn't change as much at its core fundamental level is forget the idea that like, oh, you can stay and play in the game a long time. You have to. You cannot get to the top any other way. Like, there's no such thing as in League and other games where someone like I'll give you an example. There's a famous story, if you've ever read any of the Korean interviews of the last few years, where Clid, the guy who was like that monster jungler for SK Telecom, was supposedly like a gold player in Korea, totally dog shit. And then he just read like a guide to Lee Sin that literally said, going on the queues, and he just like right to the top of Challenger and became like a top pro in like LPL, and then like that story almost doesn't exist in Counter-Strike. Instead of Counter-Strike, like if you become a player now where I only watch the top 10, 15 teams, right? I mean, now I have to watch more because of Flashpoint, but like if I only watch those teams, the player who's coming on the radar for me, so I'll give you one, the best player in Jack's team, Cloud9, is a guy called Floppy. To me, he's a new player. He's played something like 10 seasons of the Mountain Dew League, which means that I think he must have been playing for like 6-7 years or something. So maybe slightly less than that. But you know what I mean? Like, the idea is he had to put in mad hours to get to this level. Like, that's why it's unlikely that once he's like right on the brink, he's going to go, you know what? Any fun new games I can switch and pivot complete? You know, he's been waiting for this for a long time.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And it's a perfect example, actually.
Well, I guess we're at the point in the show where we normally like to open it up to our guest. If there's any like misconceptions in the community about Cloud9 or yourself that you'd like to like talk about in this open format, if there's anything that we haven't hit on in the show that you would have liked to talk about, we can do a topic there. We can close it out. So it's really on you if we hit everything, or if there's anything left that you would like to discuss.
You know, we hit everything that really mattered, and just want to thank you for inviting me. It's pretty exciting to be a part of this.
No, it's fun. I mean, this is you're obviously the first owner we've ever had on our show, so it's really nice to talk about the business side. I wasn't actually sure how this show would go because I'm not really in touch with how much my community wants to hear about the business side versus like the individual players. But this is one of our highest viewed episodes that we've had in terms of live viewership here. So obviously you did a great job.
That's cool.
Yeah. So it was super it was a super fun conversation. I mean, I personally learned a lot. I mean, there was times where I wasn't speaking because I don't want to talk about things I don't know about. So when we were discussing the equity thing, I mean, that was
to me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I'm 100% down to learn. Yeah, exactly. I'm 100% down to hear this type of stuff, and it gives really good insight. So I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you to all the viewers here that watched, and we will be back next week for another episode of the Crackdown. See you guys.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.